Harper was born in a rural area and lived there until she reached adulthood. Her parents harbored aspirations of seeing her pursue a university education, and when Harper delivered the delightful news of her acceptance, they were overjoyed. Acquiring knowledge came naturally to Harper. She possessed a genuine desire to excel in the field of medicine. It was during her time at university that she met her future spouse, Carson. Harper was in her first year, while Carson was in his final year. Just a few weeks before his graduation, he summoned the courage to ask her on a date. This marked the beginning of a deep bond that endured for many years. As time passed, Carson proposed to Harper, who accepted his proposal without hesitation. Her affection for Carson was profound. She had always dreamt of her own wedding, even more so than leaving her village for the allure of the city. Harper's parents couldn't contain their elation upon witnessing their daughter find a compassionate partner and settle down in the bustling metropolis. They had been worried that Harper might return to the village to resume employment after completing her studies. Over the years, Carson and Harper became parents. After her second maternity leave to care for their newborn, Harper decided not to return to her profession. Carson was busy running his own dental office, leaving Harper alone at home with their children. Often feeling bored, she yearned for the good old days when she and Carson could escape from their busy lives and enjoy a few days of camping in the mountains. To break the monotony, Harper began visiting her parents more frequently. Whenever they called for help, she readily came to their aid and occasionally brought the kids along, knowing how much joy they brought to their grandparents. During one of these visits, Harper had the unexpected pleasure of reuniting with her longtime childhood friend, Xavier. Overcome with excitement, she exclaimed, "Well, slap me on the knee. Is it really you?" Hugging him tightly, she expressed how she never thought she would see him again. Xavier explained that although he had left the area, circumstances had forced him to return to his parents' house, which now belonged to him. He announced his intentions to live there permanently, as he had no plans to sell the property in the near future. Standing together in the middle of the street, they became engrossed in an endless conversation. Harper, beaming with joy, invited Xavier to join her family for dinner later that evening, assuring him that her mother would be very happy to see him. Enthusiastically agreeing, Xavier found himself on their doorstep before dark. Overcome with delight, Harper's mother burst into tears of joy when she saw him. She had always considered Xavier her adopted son, who had been an integral part of their lives during the inseparable days of childhood. The evening passed in an atmosphere of warm camaraderie. The group relived childhood memories, shared stories about their current lives, and engaged in animated discussions on politics and other topics. By the time the third bottle of wine Harper had brought from the city was uncorked, the gathering had grown pleasantly buzzed and the parents had nodded off. "It's wonderful being here with you," Xavier remarked. "It's like stepping back into my childhood. Too bad we don't look as good as we did back then." Harper chuckled. "Don't be so modest. You look stunning," he countered. Harper felt a wave of embarrassment at hearing such a compliment from an old friend. Though once close, this kind of exchange between them was both surprising and delightful. As Xavier was preparing to leave, he offered to walk Harper to the gate. They lingered outside, soaking in the fresh June night air. It carried a unique scent, distinct from the city's, evoking the carefree spirit of their younger days. There they stood, pressed against the fence, each lost in their own reverie. "I've always had feelings for you," Xavier murmured thickly. Harper gazed at him, her eyes wide with astonishment, and burst into laughter. "And you never thought to mention this before?" she asked. "You've only ever seen me as a sibling," he explained solemnly. "I feared that baring my soul might ruin what we share." As Harper peered deeply into his eyes, the image of the boy she once knew faded, and before her stood a striking, well-built man. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Harper impulsively kissed him. Xavier embraced her fiercely, as if she were his most prized possession. He drew her close, and in her bewildered state, she found herself unable to resist. When Harper woke up the next morning, she felt overwhelmed with embarrassment. It seemed to her that all eyes were on her, knowing about the events of the previous evening. Later that day, she hurried back to the city, leaving her puzzled parents without explaining the reasons for her sudden departure. A devoted husband was waiting for her at home, and over time, the memories of that night began to fade. As winter rolled in, Harper received a call from her mother, asking her to come over to lend a hand and simply spend time together. Harper knew she couldn't say no. She'd already postponed her visit. However, she dreaded the possibility of bumping into Xavier again. She agreed with a caveat, warning her mother that her stay would be brief. Back in the city, work beckoned, and she had to get the kids ready for the New Year's festivities. Predictably, the first person she laid eyes on when she arrived in the village was Xavier, busy helping a neighbor shovel snow. He looked up as she approached. To maintain appearances, they exchanged greetings, but her mother couldn't help but notice the tension and asked, "Did you two have a falling out?" "It's fine, Mom," Harper replied, though her nerves were frayed. Throughout her stay at her parents' house, Harper felt on edge, half expecting Xavier to walk through the door at any moment to hash things out. After all, the last time she had skedaddled without a word. But the days went by and Xavier remained conspicuously absent. On the eve of her departure, Harper chose to meander through the winter woods one final time. Out of the blue, Xavier's voice drifted in from the side. "Hey!" he called out, startling Harper. "Why on earth would you frighten me like that?" she blurted out. They faced each other silently for a brief moment. It was Xavier who finally shattered the quiet. "What made you bolt that day?" he inquired. "I made a grave error. I'm married with children. It was a colossal mistake, and I'm truly sorry," Harper responded. Xavier's expression darkened, his features tightening. It pained him to digest her words. After all, he had spent years longing for the moment Harper would regard him as something beyond a mere acquaintance. He pivoted and made his way back to the village. Harper lingered, watching his retreating figure. She acknowledged that her friend would no longer disrupt her frequent trips to see her parents. He hadn't spilled their secret to anyone, and it seemed improbable that he would start now. Hence, she continued her visits as regularly as before. Over the New Year's break, they had all ventured to the village as a family. As dusk fell, Harper's mother gleefully made an announcement. With casual nonchalance, she invited Xavier to join them for dinner so he could meet Carson. Harper squirmed internally, anxious about Xavier's possible drunken antics, or if he might overshare. The evening, however, unfolded smoother than expected. Xavier and Carson unexpectedly hit it off, causing Harper even more unease. She had anticipated a night filled with awkward silences, yet the reality was a burgeoning camaraderie between the two men. As dinner wrapped up, they were chumming up like old pals, stepping outside for a smoke. Carson briefly left the scene, and seizing the moment, Harper pulled Xavier aside and whispered sharply, "Who invited you here?" "Your mom," Xavier shot back with a defiant smirk. Just then, Carson reappeared and curiously inquired about their hushed exchange. "We were just reminiscing about that wild night we all spent together," Xavier joked, chuckling. Harper's face drained of color. "And when was this supposed to have happened?" Carson pressed. "Summer," Harper blurted out, her voice a mix of hope and dread as she braced for her husband's response. Carson's eyes fluttered as the gravity of the words he had just heard sank in. His mother approached them and asked, "What's up?" Xavier repeated the same statement to her, unable to hold her. Emotions overwhelmed Harper as she bolted outside, settling on the steps while tears streamed down her face. Within moments, an irate Carson stormed out of the house. Harper felt a flicker of relief, knowing the kids were fast asleep, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding around them. In a fit of rage, Carson shoved her, sending her tumbling down the steps into the icy snow. Her tear-streaked face burned from the cold. "I'm not staying under the same roof as that one," he shouted, jabbing a finger in his wife's direction. "I won't!" The gate clanged shut behind him as he stormed off, trailed by his father-in-law. Moments later, Xavier emerged from the house with a grin that resembled a cat who had feasted on cream. Harper shot him a livid glare, but he ignored her, retreating indoors without uttering a single word. Carson concluded their marriage, leading to Harper's expulsion from their shared home. The responsibility of caring for their children fell solely on Carson due to their educational pursuits, leaving Harper despondent but bereft of alternatives. She made an effort to secure employment within her field of expertise, but to no avail. Exhausting all possibilities, she soon realized that no viable opportunities existed near her rented abode. Fatigued from her relentless pursuit to rebuild her life, Harper would return home and weep, lighting one cigarette after another. Her mother extended an invitation for her to return to the family's village, but Harper adamantly declined, knowing it would mean confronting the man who had irreparably damaged her existence on a daily basis. Despite her perseverance and attempts to seek companionship, potential suitors vanished upon learning Harper had abandoned her husband and children. Even the most promising relationships seemed to dissolve into thin air. Faced with this reality, Harper resolved to throw herself fully into her professional endeavors. From time to time, she caught glimpses of her children, but, in most cases, her busy schedule prevented her from spending time with them. Harper was angry at her life partner, but even more so at herself for leaving her family so absurdly. Cheating Secrets podcast like me.